Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, opposition demonstrators accuse Ethiopian security forces of killing dozens of protesters across the country's Oromiya and Amhara regions. The government blames unrest on foreign enemies and social media. Also, it was a certain victory. The former premier of Sao Tome wins the presidential runoff vote after he stood unopposed. His would-be rival, the incumbent Manuel Pinto da Costa, boycotted the poll after alleging fraud. And we take a look at the lemurs of Madagascar, whose rarity draws in the tourists, but conservationists do face a challenge in preserving the precious forests in which they live. Well, first, Amnesty International claims that more than 90 people were shot dead by Ethiopian security forces in protests over the weekend. The latest anti-government demonstrations happened in the Oromiya and Amhara regions. Such rallies are rare in Ethiopia and were first sparked last November, by plans to expand the capital, Addis Ababa, into Oromiya farmland. The project was later dropped, but rallies continued with Oromo and Amharic demonstrators complaining of marginalisation and human rights violations. The government's blamed foreign enemies and social media activists for holding unauthorised marches. Karim Labor tells us more.
The size of the demonstration in Ethiopia over the weekend is only starting to emerge with a very heavy toll, at least 50 people dead. On Saturday, thousands of Oromos protested all over the Oromiya region, responding to a call for a day of protest against the government. They were met with a brutal response and live fire by the police. For the first time, those demonstrations extended to the capital, Addis Ababa, where a few hundred protesters have been quickly dispersed and beaten up by the police. And on Sunday, the protest extended to the Amhara region in the north, in the city of Bahir Dar, where several thousand people gathered. Again, clashes between protesters and police left several dozen people dead. The Ethiopian government responded to this string of protests by blocking the internet and cutting phone networks over the weekend. Amharas and Oromos have been protesting for months in Ethiopia with various grievances challenging the heavy-handed rule of the party in power in Ethiopia for the last 25 years.
Karim Labor there for us in Addis Ababa. Now, Chadian opposition activists say that they filed a complaint of high treason against President Idriss Deby. He was sworn in for a fifth term in office on Monday, but some of his critics maintain that he won by fraud and say that they're disappointed France has supported his re-inauguration.
Idriss Deby is used to swearing-in ceremonies. He took power in 1990 and is starting his fifth mandate.
I, the elected president, according to the laws of the country, solemnly swear in front of the Chadian people to preserve and respect the Constitution.
14 African presidents came to N'Djamena. Like Deby, many of them are taking part in the struggle against jihadist groups in the Sahel region and in Nigeria. The French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian also made the trip. His presence was criticized by the opposition, who called Deby a dictator. Paris considers Deby as its best military ally in the region, following Chad's interventions in Mali and the Central African Republic. And N'Djamena is also the headquarters of Barkhane, France's military operation in the Sahel region. In April, Deby officially won the election in the first round with nearly 60% of the vote. The opposition said there had been massive fraud. Tensions remain high. On Sunday, a protester was shot dead during a demonstration against Idriss Deby.
Angolan separatists claim that at least 10 soldiers have been killed in clashes with rebels in Cabinda. The Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda, or FLEC, want independence for the oil-producing region. The latest violence broke out on Friday and Saturday following fatal attacks earlier on in the month. The secessionists have grown increasingly militant recently and have also called for Chinese companies to pull out their staff, calling their presence a provocation. As Zambia gears up for Thursday's presidential, local and parliamentary polls, the Constitutional Court on Monday contradicted President Edgar Lungu and ordered all the government ministers to step down ahead of the elections. Lungu's Patriotic Front Party said it will abide by the order. The leaders expect to face stiff competition from opposition Hakainde Hichilema. His UPND accuses the PF of intimidating its supporters and trying to fix the vote. Sao Tome's former Prime Minister Evaristo Carvalho has won a presidential runoff in the West African archipelago. Victory was pretty certain as he ran unopposed, but it wasn't without its problems. He'd initially been declared outright winner last month, but opposition from his rival, incumbent Manuel Pinto da Costa, saw the tally revised down to just under 50%, and so prompting Sunday's follow-up poll. That was then boycotted by Pinto da Costa. The country had been held up as a model of democracy. Caterina Vitozzi tells us more.
Voter turnout was disappointing for Sunday's presidential election second round runoff. The National Election Commission said that just 46% of registered voters turned out to cast their ballot. That's well down on the numbers in the first round. But many people here saying they simply didn't bother to vote in an election where there was only one candidate and therefore only one outcome. The incumbent president, Manuel Pinto da Costa, pulled out of this election race last week, citing electoral fraud. The man left in the competition, and the man that won Sunday's vote, Evaristo Carvalho, well, he said it was purely a case of sour grapes and that his contender pulled out because he didn't want to lose.
He was scared of losing again. He and his supporters have done everything to try and get this election cancelled, to get as many people as possible not to vote. But I'm convinced that people in Sao Tome know what they want.
The Supreme Court here in Sao Tome still has to validate the results of the election, but supporters of Evaristo Carvalho say that this is just a technicality and they expect their man to be sworn in at the end of September. His election as the country's president will mean that for the first time in many years, Sao Tome will have a president and a prime minister from the same political party. And although critics say that this one-party rule can lead to its own problems, the ruling party, as you might expect, say that this solidarity will mean enhanced political stability for the country and allow the government to move ahead with economic benefits for the whole population.
Caterina Vitozzi there for us. Well, finally, lemurs are unique to Madagascar, and so the country is world famous for being home to dozens of species of the primates. They are, though, sadly, one of the most threatened groups of mammals on the planet. As their rarity continues to attract tourists to the island, conservationists are struggling to protect the rainforests in which they live. Pascal Davies tells us more.
Behind the mists of Madagascar lie some of the most mysterious parks in the world, with 16,000 hectares of tropical forest. A veil behind which flourish species found nowhere else in the world. But if you want to see them, you have to follow their sounds. It's via these strange cries that the residents of this forest communicate. Finding their source can take hours of walking.
There are some lemurs going by here somewhere.
6 lemurs are clinging to this branch. The species is usually unseen in daylight as they're nocturnal. But there are 14 other species in this park, many of which can be spotted in the day. These small primates who live hidden in the treetops are the treasure of Madagascar. They live no other place on Earth. Jean-Etienne Toto is one of the guardians of this sanctuary. For 20 years, he's guided tourists in the forest. Looking for its inhabitants, he can decipher their calls.
There's a call of fear, a cry of alarm. He continues like that, wah, like that. That's to alert the group, and the normal call, that's whiff, whiff. It's like that.
Among all the lemurs in the park, one is the star of the show, who everyone wants to see. It's the Indri, the biggest lemur in the world. An adult can measure up to 70 centimetres and can live up to 80 years with a family life almost like our own.
They live in small families. They have babies every 2 or 3 years with one mate for life. They stay alone when they've lost their mate. It's impossible to capture the Indri Indri.
No zoo has this species. To keep it from disappearing, Madagascar preserves its forests. But the island has lost 80% of it in a single century. 43 parks are now protected to keep a flora and fauna among the richest in the world.
Ah, looks gorgeous. Well, that is, though, where we're going to have to leave it now for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Marco In. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question. But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24 Paris.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد
Also coming up.
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.